The concept of pro bono publico, for the public good, is not new. It's been around for hundreds of years. But what does it mean to lawyers? We'll talk about Pro Bono Legal Services right now on The Law Works.
From West Virginia Public Broadcasting.
Closed captioning for The Law Works is made possible by a grant from the Monongalia County Bar Association to support legal information and education for all West Virginians. The Law Works is made possible by a major grant from the West Virginia Bar Foundation, the philanthropic organization for West Virginia's legal profession and legal system, promoting public knowledge of the law in West Virginia. By the generous support of Software Systems Incorporated, a West Virginia company established in 1975, providing high-end support services, programming, and consulting for county government AS400 mid-range computer systems, as well as PC-based systems. And by viewers like you.
The concept of pro bono work is not unique to lawyers, but it seems to be best known as a legal concept. My guests are attorneys William T. Holmes, William Savers, and Diane Young of the Legal Aid of West Virginia Pro Bono Referral Project. You're a private practice attorney.
I am.
Bill Holmes, you're
Yes.
a private practice attorney. Bill Savers, you are also a private practice attorney in a sense.
I'm retired after a number of years, about 30 years in the energy industry, starting out with Columbia down in Charleston, and with Cabot Oil and Gas in Charleston, as well as Boston and Emerald, and then most recently with CNG and Dominion in Clarksburg.
And apparently
And
he's
retired.
He's apparently now seen the light, and he's out doing good works for the public.
Yes, he is.
You say good works. That's what pro bono really is. What does that mean, Diane?
I work for Legal Aid, so we have income guidelines for people, and I go out and get private attorneys to help these people that otherwise couldn't hire attorneys. Because
So pro bono legal work is legal work that is done for a reduced fee or a low
Yes.
fee, or perhaps for no fee.
free.
Who qualifies for it?
We have income guidelines. We go by number and family and monthly income.
So basically, if you're in the lower economic echelons, you might be eligible.
Might be, yes.
What kind of cases are we talking about to get handled?
We have lots of domestic cases, lots and lots of domestic cases, but we have a wide range of other civil cases too. Bankruptcies, consumer, income maintenance, those kind of things, any kind of civil.
Some of that's pretty sophisticated law.
Yes. it
Bankruptcy
is.
law, for example, is not for the timid.
No, it's not.
And I would never recommend that anybody try to take on their own bankruptcy case. It doesn't seem like a good idea. Bill Holmes, what kind of law do you practice for the Pro Bono Project?
I do the commercial side. I know that's not a word that's used much in pro bono, but the real estate, the landlord-tenant, maybe credit card problem, an estate where a party feels like they're not being handled or dealt fairly. In along those lines. Originally, when I first started, I did the domestic violence petitions on behalf of the petitioner, but Diane kind of calls me whenever she doesn't know who else to give it to. She'll give me a call and say, Bill, can you help me on this? And I try. I can't always do it, but I try. Or I tell her, no, I can't, and call Dan Ringer.
Bill Savers, you're an energy guy, an oil and gas guy. What can you do for pro bono?
Well, basically, I go in and take whatever cases Diane assigns me and have to read up on the law and try to figure out from the law school what I remember, and then read up on the rest of it. I've done things like lemon law cases, guardianship, of course, the estate cases, as well as credit card cases, And you get into all sorts of different scenarios. Sometimes it's very simple. You guide a person through what the requirements are, you review it and make sure that they have done it adequately and get it filed. And other times it turns to be a family dispute and it gets mired down in all sorts of messy complications.
You said something that I think in the pro bono world is true. You get involved in cases and you have to read up on it. There are a lot of lawyers out there who will say, I don't want to do pro bono work because I don't want to get involved in a case that I don't know anything about, the kind of law that I don't know anything about. Is that a real problem?
For the most part, I don't think so. It's the type of problems that people have are trying to find how to thread through a needle, and they don't understand what the law means or how to go about walking through the procedures. And for an attorney, finding those procedures and drawing on your colleagues and asking some questions usually facilitates the process a lot for those people so that they can actually get something done. In the messy cases, you're probably out there on your own where there's not much law being made. I've got a situation now where I did some research, and the case that I'm looking at is 1909. So that tells you that you got into an area where there's not been a lot of dispute and a lot of cases and a lot of law per se, so you have to rely upon your wits and try to find out how you apply the facts to that particular type of standard that you're trying to apply from 1909.
One thing that is true is lawyers are not interchangeable. We even have a word for that. We say they're not fungible. It means that you can just substitute one for another. In the general practice of law, lawyers have particular areas of expertise. You, Bill Saviors, were an energy lawyer. You, Bill Holmes, in your private practice, do a lot of real estate law,
Correct.
some litigation.
Correct.
And I do a little bit of everything as a general practitioner, but I have some areas that I prefer to work in as opposed to others. But when you get into pro bono legal aid type work, these are really basic questions, usually.
Usually.
Plus, if I may add, Diane knows her attorneys, if you will. She knows not to call me on a case that I'm uncomfortable with. Now, that's not to say that she won't call me and say, look, here's the problem. Do you know of anybody that I may ask to do this for me, and I will help her with a referral. But she knows what she's doing when it comes to divvying up the cases, if you will. She goes to the person that has some experience in it.
Where do you get your lawyers?
Just I run around and talk to them, and
Knocks on their doors.
I knock on their doors and I'm in their face. And
But I literally have had a lot of lawyers, particularly young lawyers, say to me, well, I'm afraid to do that. I don't know how to do that. Is that something that's a real impediment to you?
It is sometimes. Like domestic cases, we have a really, really hard time getting people to take domestic violence.
Why is that?
Because the cases drag out and they're so long and they take a lot of time. And there's a lot of people that aren't comfortable with domestic. Bill won't touch a domestic case because he's not comfortable with it, and it does take a long time.
But in my own experience, Bill Holmes, you and I have practiced law for approximately the same amount of time, which is, I think, forever minus 5 years.
One of us is insulted by that comment. You know that, don't you?
Well,
but yes, you're right.
For a long time.
Yes, we are contemporaries. Let's put it that way.
We also recognize that some kinds of cases, and domestic violence cases are a good example of that. There are not really any tricky questions of law here.
No, the domestic violence and domestic law, domestic relations law in general, are so emotionally charged that, quite frankly, the word reasonable very rarely enters into the conversation. And especially with domestic violence, you're dealing with someone who is fearful for their life, and they need somebody to help them. And the same thing with estates. You get family members involved, and all of the pent-up frustrations between family members comes pouring out when the head of the family, if you will, the matriarch or the patriarch, is no longer there to keep everybody under control. So domestic law is very emotionally charged, and it's more a matter of being an arbiter, if you will, or a mediator, not only protecting the interests of your own client, but help them say, look, let's look down the road a little bit here and forget, or not forget, but tone down your immediate hurt.
You serve as an objective voice.
Try to, yes. But you still have to represent your client, and so that's a skewing issue there.
Well, that gives you a perspective.
That's correct.
It gives you a point to work from.
That's correct.
Courtroom work, and when we talk about domestic violence, invariably this ends up in a courtroom, and it ends up being interviewed by the police and things like that often also, is a matter of conveying what happened at a particular time in a particular place. It's storytelling. Now, some people will criticize, say stories are made-up tales. That's not what we mean. We say storytelling. But a person who's going to have to go in and say, this is what happened to me, or this is what she did to me, or what he did to me, they have to be able to tell that story. And that's when you're representing those cases, or providing representation in those cases, that's what you do, is you help people tell their story.
That's correct. You do, you help them tell their story, and you make sure that they tell their story or get the facts out to get the protection that they need. A lot of times the person who comes in is so scared of the respondent that they don't want to talk. They don't want to talk with the person in the room.
The respondent is the one who was beating on them or whatever it was.
Correct, the perpetrator, if you will. And so you have to also tell them, look, I'm going to be there with you. Now, a person of my size, they're a little more comfortable with me being between them and the respondent than someone perhaps of Diane's size on it. But still, you have to give them the confidence to say, look, you have to tell your story here because this cannot go on. And as we all know from the statistics, victims of domestic violence very often do not leave the house the first time, or if they do, they go back.
Right.
We're talking about Pro Bono Legal Services. My guests are attorneys William T. Holmes and William Savers, and Diane Young of the Legal Aid of West Virginia Pro Bono Referral Project. I'm Dan Ringer, and this is The Law Works. There are so many ways to say things, and sometimes it carries meanings that you don't intend. I always use the same three words. I love you. Now, if you say just a flat delivery, I love you, it really doesn't contain much meaning at all. But if you say, I love you, I love you, I love you, different kinds of meanings. The words, I killed him, I killed him, I killed him, I killed him. You know, one way is a confession. The other two ways, you go home to dinner and you talk about the interesting time you had with the police. So you help people tell their story. The word rehearse probably applies to this. You rehearse someone to tell their story, but that's not a bad thing. We rehearse conversations in our minds, at least, that we might have. Before this show, I'm thinking, what questions am I going to ask? I may share some of them with you so that you know how to answer them to make a smoother flow of conversation.
Well, quite frankly, when I was doing the domestic violence work, there were so many cases on the docket. Basically, you interviewed your client once and said, okay, we've got to go. It's time for your hearing on it. But you're right. You have to say, look, I want you to get up there and tell me what happened first. And then I say, okay, now what happened here? What happened then? And those are basically the format for your questions. You know, for the victim.
What do you do? You mentioned debt collection, consumer transactions. What kind of pro bono services are available there?
I have a lot of attorneys that when people get into debt collecting, that like the one where you had, where the guy, it wasn't even him. They had picked a name. They had sent him out a bill, and and it wasn't his. He didn't know anything about it. And so I gave it to Bill, who
What do you
worked
do?
on it.
What do you do?
That's a recurring theme in a lot of these credit card
Right.
cases. You basically call the attorney, and it's sometimes
The attorney for the company that
for
wants
the
the
credit
money.
for the debt collector, and you call them and say, well, you show me the debt. What did they buy? What card did they use? Where did they sign up for it? What are the facts surrounding it? Prove your case. And they say, well, can you tell me what credit card your client had?
No, you're supposed to tell me that.
Precisely. And I go back and I say, okay, here's the last four of their Social Security, and here's where they live, and here's their full name. Now you tell me what it is they owe. And if you can't, then you basically say, I think you need to desist and leave and get out of the court docket, because you're going to get in trouble if you persist. And if you didn't do that research before you sued, you may be open to sanctions.
It is unfair, but sometimes just having somebody involved on your behalf who can say, I'm a lawyer, and works amazing results. I had a dispute with my own insurance company one time, an automobile accident, and I called and I said, I have a property damage claim under the uninsured motorist coverage of my policy. The guy who hit me didn't have any insurance. And the adjuster said, no, you don't have coverage for that. And I said, I got the policy in front of me. It says I do have coverage. And he said, I know you think you understand the language of the policy, but you don't. Now, this was an insurance company that you had to have a particular background to be insured with. And I said to him, do you know what I do for a living? And he said, yes, you're a captain in the Air Force. I said, no, that's what I used to do for a living. Now I'm a lawyer. And the next words out of his mouth were, the check is in the mail. And that's not right. You perhaps could not have done that. And if you are one of the people who are eligible for services from the Pro Bono Project, and in descriptive terms, there are people who have a limited ability to succeed in society for whatever reason. Low income, low education, maybe traumatic experiences, all kinds of problems, are not in a position to negotiate with an insurance adjuster or a bill collector. We're talking about Pro Bono Legal Services. My guests are attorneys William T. Holmes and William Savers, and Diane Young of the Legal Aid of West Virginia Pro Bono Referral Project. I'm Dan Ringer, and this is The Law Works. How many lawyers do you have that are working with Pro Bono services in West Virginia?
In the state, we have about 1,000 that do pro bono work.
It's a state of 1.8 million people.
And we have about 1,000 pro bono attorneys.
The good news is that's 20% of the attorneys in West Virginia, because there are about 5,000 attorneys
5,000
working in West Virginia. If there are attorneys out there who are not working with your project, how would they sign up? How would they get involved? You can't go knock on everybody's door.
I try. I try to go knock on everybody's door, but they can go to our website.
And that is?
lawv.net, and there's a pro bono place on the website.
There's a link there on the website.
There's a link there.
It'll take you to Pro Bono.
It'll take you to pro bono.
lawv.net. Now, that's for lawyers who would like to get involved with Pro Bono services. What about someone who says, I need Pro Bono services? How do they get in touch with you?
They call the Atlas line. We have a new intake service, and they call our Charleston Atlas line.
Do you know that number?
I do not, actually.
Well, by the time we get this program on the air, it will be on the screen so people can read it off there, and it'll also be at our website. And we have a link at our website associated with this program. Our website is thelawworks.org, and that link you click on that link and it will take you to a map of West Virginia. You pick the county where you need the help, and you will get not only the Pro Bono Referral Project and Legal Aid, you'll get a list of other agencies that can help you, such as the Attorney General's Office. And in fact, we're talking about debt collection. The Attorney General's Office is a great resource if somebody's trying to collect a debt that you don't think you owe.
Right.
So there are a variety of sources there. That's at thelawworks.org, and we'll click you through to whatever else you need from that legal aid services map.
Right.
What would you tell a young attorney who's debating, or even an older attorney who's debating whether or not they ought to get involved with this?
You will not have a more grateful client than a pro bono client. They know they cannot afford you. They know that you're doing it because you want to help them without any expectation of being paid for your services. They know that you're trying to solve a problem for them. And a lot of times it's just communication. They don't know what they need from the other side to accomplish something. And so you translate for them, if you will. And if I might relate a story that happened to me back when the Wills Project first started, there was an individual who...
But the Wills Project, you're talking about a project where you helped people learn to write wills or write their own wills?
Yes, the law students at West Virginia University College of Law a student would accompany me. We would go talk to a person to do their will. And again, I think there were income limits on it, but we went to this one individual's house or apartment, and the individual had a collection of items that had no intrinsic value to it. But she wanted to leave that to her nephew because her nephew always enjoyed those, and she wanted him to remember her by that. Well, we did the will for myself and the law student, and we executed it for it, and she couldn't thank us enough. She about shook our hands off our arms, saying, "Thank you very much." That was weighing on her. I mean, yes, that was not a big deal in terms of the world, but to her, that was the most major problem she was concerned with. And the gratitude that you get from them, to me, is worth it all. Now, you can't do it 100%,
Right.
or else you won't be making a living very long.
I mean, you can't dedicate all of your time.
Unless you want to
pro bono
go be
work.
hired by legal aid, which I understand may not be a possibility, but you're right. You cannot do it all the time. So there is a balance. If all attorneys in the state would donate 10 hours a year, 10 hours a year is not even a weekend worth of work, and they would have enough coverage on it. But to me, it's the satisfaction and the gratitude that the clients give you in return for helping them, literally helping them.
Bill Saviors, what would you tell somebody who is not involved but who might be contemplating or be willing to be involved?
Well, there are several ways to get involved in pro bono work. I mean, the rules of professional conduct talk about pro bono publico service, and not only serving people but serving organizations. And there are a number of lawyers who act as advisors to church groups, to Rotary, to all sorts of different public oriented organizations for free, and they don't charge for their services. In addition to that, there's the issue of providing services for the poor. And sometimes, like you said, and in my case, in my corporate career, it was very difficult because we didn't do criminal appointments because of our scheduling with our employer. And the same thing applied to pro bono cases, other than advising charitable organizations, which I did during my career. But when you are retired or you have some extra time that you can allocate or schedule for these types of things, it's a wonderful thing to do for those reasons, because people a lot of times don't know what to do. They don't know where to look or how to look. And with the lawyer's training and usually your contacts after you've been out for a few years out of school, you get to know these types of issues and can jump into a very sticky technical question fairly quickly, and more often than not come up with a resolution. And for people who are working in firms and find themselves in 60-hour work weeks, there are some very important things, I think, that our attorneys in West Virginia need to contemplate and try to think out of the box. One of those issues is that Legal Aid of West Virginia relies on LSC, the Law Services Corporation, for its funding. And that funding can be a political nightmare as well as a recession nightmare, depending upon what's happening in the country or what's happening in the state. And we need to think better on how to embed core legal services for the poor into our state so that we don't have to rely upon a lot of this funding, so that in good years when the economy is doing well, we have great funds, but generally that's when you need little legal advice for people. The debt collections are down. But in recessions, when the money's difficult to come by, that's when you need to have help. You need to have that advice for people, because that's when they really need it. And that's when our society and our social structure is less, prepared to supply it also.
We should clarify that the Pro Bono Referral Project does not provide assistance in criminal cases.
No.
It's only civil.
Only civil and no fee generating, like personal injury.
So I can't sue you and get a free lawyer to do that.
No, you can't.
Diane Young, Bill Holmes, Bill Saviors, thank you for being with us.
You're welcome.
You're welcome.
Some pro bono lawyers even host public television shows. On behalf of the LawWorks, I'm Dan Ringer. Good evening. On the LawWorks website at thelawworks.org, you'll find a listing of recent The LawWorks programs, additional information about this show's topic, and video of this and recent shows. You can also find the LawWorks programs on YouTube and iTunes. If you would like to suggest a topic for a future The LawWorks show, or if you're a school teacher and would like to receive a DVD of this show for classroom use, send us email at thelawworks@comcast.net or visit us on Facebook.
The LawWorks is produced in cooperation with the West Virginia Bar Foundation, the Mountain State Bar, the Monongalia County Bar Association, and the West Virginia University College of Law. The LawWorks is made possible by a major grant from the West Virginia Bar Foundation, the philanthropic organization for West Virginia's legal profession and legal system, promoting public knowledge of the law in West Virginia. By the generous support of Software Systems Incorporated, a West Virginia company established in 1975, providing high-end support services, programming, and consulting for county government AS400 mid-range computer systems, as well as PC-based systems. And by viewers like you.
From West Virginia Public Broadcasting.